Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 regular board meeting, virtual board meeting. Could you please do roll call, Ms.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mr. Ethtimer?
Present.
Mr. Freitas?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Lamos?
Here.
Dr. Pomponio?
Here.
Mr. Sage?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. And if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Southgate's mission statement, learning for life. Our vision statement, Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Brings us to item D, revisions and approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do we have a second on that?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Craig. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Grosky, will you call the question?
Mr. Ethtimer?
Yes.
Mr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Green? Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Lamos?
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio?
Yes.
Mr. Sage?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes. Or here.
Thank you.
Whichever.
Andy's multitasking. He explained that prior.
Doing it
All right.
early.
Brings us to item E, citizens' comments. Would you please read our citizens' comments for tonight?
I
Ms.
will.
Irvine?
Yep, I will. Our first comment is from Gloria Marquez. She is at 16301 Kennebec. Her comment is the MDHHS is allowing sports to resume contact practice and competition starting yesterday, 2/8/2021. As I do understand that the board has to follow rules and timelines, I don't understand why the board didn't put the students before the athletes. Why didn't the board choose to make the sports follow the same guidelines as in-person learning? How can my son be safe in a middle school, full contact athletic program like wrestling, be allowed to roll on a mat with another student while my high school student can't be safe in the classroom with a mask, socially distanced? Same district, returning to the same home. How do you justify this hypocritical decision? Do we have student athletes or athlete students? I want more than anything for my son to participate in the sport, but how can I do that if I have to tell my high school student they can't safely return to a classroom? And I will follow up with Ms. Marquez tomorrow.
Thank you.
The second citizen comment, Derek Jacob Paul Forshear. Hello, you guys. Excuse me, he is at 28325 Walnut Creek. Hey, you guys, I'd just like to know how it would be like if we went back to school in person. Thank you, guys. I hope you don't get sick or anything and have a wonderful rest of your year. And then I will also, of course, follow up with Derek. We have another comment from Robert Pulowski from 12757 Chestnut Street. And his comment is, good evening. It's me again. I would like to thank the superintendent, Ms. Irvine, for reaching out to me over the comments I made at the last board meeting. I spoke in January. But the reason I'm here tonight is that you guys made the decision back in January to let all students have the option to go in-person classes or stay virtual. And if students were coming back for in-person classes, it would be February 1st. Now it's February 9th. Now, and only elementary and middle school are the ones having in-person classes. And what I've heard, it would be February 18th for the entire district to go back. Now I'm hearing February 22nd for the entire district to go back. Which one is it? This is honestly getting beyond ridiculous at this point for real. At this point, tell the students that they will be going back on March 1st at this point, because it's pointless to send the students back February 22nd when March 1st is only a week away from the 22nd, though. It just doesn't make any sense. What really upsets me is you guys flipping the date around when we can go back into the schools for face-to-face learning. That really has to stop, because I'm getting to the point where it's getting ridiculous. Either keep us virtual for the rest of the year or send us back to schools. Either March 1st or February, whenever. Make the decision, which one is it? For the record, I'm here saying this for students and parents that want students to go back into school for face-to-face learning. And I honestly feel their pain and stress of trying to work from home and making sure the internet isn't going to drop out on them, or other things going to or going around them that makes it hard for them to do their work for their job. Plus, staying virtual is possibly a great way for a student that does not use or have a cell phone or does not use or have technology in general, is possibly prone to becoming an introvert because of the lack of social interaction with friends or peers because they're not in the building or in school yet. Think about that for a second, but I feel their pain and stress completely. And I'm not the only one in tonight's board meeting making comments about face-to-face learning tonight. But anyway, please take my comments tonight into consideration and talk it over with the board members tonight or whenever in the future. If there's no time during the meeting tonight, though, I will be looking forward to a phone call and a follow-up about tonight's meeting if need be. Have a wonderful rest of your week and also enjoy your weekend as well. Thank you and take care. Be safe out there. Robert Pulowski. And I will follow up with him as well.
All right. Thank you for all the citizens for reaching out, and thanks, Ms. Irvine, for following up. Those all deserve and have those questions will be answered. Moving on to item F, presentations. We don't have any scheduled for this evening. Ms. Irvine, do you have a superintendent update for us tonight?
I just have one to talk about, and the theme of this week and last week has been vaccinations. And I just kind of wanted to report out, we had about 170 of our staff vaccinated on Saturday, and that combined with nearly 120 of our staff who'd been vaccinated at an earlier time. So it's we're in great hands and great shape, and that's been happening across the district. But I want to thank our parents for being so understanding, because we know that the second dose does come with a pretty significant impact. And for that reason, we've allowed our teachers to move their class to asynchronous for a couple of days after that vaccination so that work can go on. And I appreciate all the parents who've been so understanding about that. And now as we're dealing with the impact of the second dose from the February 6th vaccination, we're looking at another asynchronous day on March 1st for the district. So just hanging in there and be with us on this. And just want to say thanks for all the support.
Thank you. And we don't have a scheduled finance update for this evening, correct?
No.
All right, moving on to our consent agenda. If you had a chance to look that over, I'll take a motion for that.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do we have a second?
Support.
Supported by, was that Mr. Sage? Okay. All right, any discussion? All right, if you can call the question, Ms. Grahowski.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. And I failed to mention for those watching, that says the consent agenda has items from our minutes from our January 19th special meeting and January 26th regular meeting, HR update, and disbursements for January 2021. All right, moving to the action portion of our agenda tonight. We have action item number 1. That's the approval of the board members finance committee. Find that. Go ahead, Ms. Irvine.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you can go ahead and read this one, obviously, so no problem.
All right, at the board workshop on February 2nd, trustee Jason Craig, Rick Lamas, and Neil Freitas volunteered to join a finance committee to receive and provide the board with periodic updates on the district's financial status. The resolution has been produced to formalize their participation on the subcommittee for the 2021 year. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, and I'll accept the motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the assignments of Craig, Lamos, and Freitas to the Board of Education Finance Subcommittee for the 2021 year.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do we have a support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Sage. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Grasky, will you please call the question?
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, and thanks for those who volunteered. And brings us to action item number 2, the approval of the members of our board policy subcommittee. So like the finance committee, we have another committee, standing committee called the policy committee. And on February 2nd, during our meeting, Vice President Green and trustees Dr. Pomponio and Sean Sage volunteered to join that subcommittee to receive and provide the board with periodic updates on district policy. This resolution has been produced to formalize their participation on that subcommittee for the 2021 school year. And do we have any comments or questions on this specific action? Seeing none, I'll accept the motion for approval.
Mr. President,
Mr. Craig.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the assignments of Vice President Green, Trustee Pomponio, and Trustee Sage to the Board of Education Policy Subcommittee for the 2021 year.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. And do we have a second to that motion?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Lamos. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the question?
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. And once again, thank you so much for your participation in that valuable subcommittee. Brings us to action item number 3. This is approval of the board's MASB delegate for the Board of Directors elections. Ms. Irvine, did you want to present this?
Sure. In March, a representative from Southgate Community School District Board of Education will attend the Board of Directors elections for MASB, and this representative will cast votes on behalf of the school board. At the February 2nd board workshop, Dr. Darlene Pomponio was identified as that representative. And so she will be the delegate if approved by the board.
Dr. Pomponio, do we have to, I think last year we had included in the motion what's it called? I volunteered to be your backup, but that's not the word for it.
Well, that's usually for the delegate assembly, but this is, we have to name the person that we choose for Region 8. And there's several regions here, but I recommend one of the persons that's for Region 8. So would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, please make a motion including that name. That'd be fantastic. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve to approve Darlene Pomponio as the delegate of the Southgate Board of Education to vote in MASB's Board of Directors elections. And I'd like to nominate or elect Bridget McQuiston from Lake Orion as the candidate for Region 8.
All right. And do we have a second for that motion?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Lamos. Any discussion on that topic? All right. And what was her name again?
Bridget McQuiston.
Okay.
She's a long-time board member from Lake Orion, so she's a good candidate. I've known her for several years.
Thanks. I just wanted to find her in our little book here.
Yeah, she's at the very last, I think, last page.
All right. Fantastic. I appreciate that. And if you please call the question now.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos.
Yes.
Thank you. And good luck to Bridget McQuiston. All right. Motion carries. And now what brings us to action item number 4. This is approval of a resolution to permit school boards to meet in person. Ms. Irvine, did you want to present this?
Yes. So now until at least March 30th, 2021, the Board of Education is prohibited from meeting in person because the Southgate Community School District is currently offering a safe in-person school option. The Board of Education should be able to show its confidence in the safety of gatherings by holding an in-person board meetings. This resolution is available for the Board of Education to communicate this preference. And I will go ahead and read this resolution aloud. Resolution to permit school boards to meet in person. Whereas school districts have been strongly encouraged to begin offering in-person instruction by March 1st, 2021, and each local school board has the responsibility to make that ultimate decision for their school district. And whereas Southgate Community Schools has worked diligently to prepare for and implement the return to in-person learning for all students in grades pre-K, K-12, and post-secondary. And whereas all students and staff are permitted by the state of Michigan, including the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, to attend school in person. And whereas members of the school boards are not only individuals within their school districts, are the only individuals within their school districts who are not permitted to meet in person. And whereas requiring school boards to meet virtually while encouraging students to attend school in person and for staff to work in person sends a mixed message to our community and staff. And whereas Southgate Community Schools would like the ability to meet in person with strong health and safety mitigation measures in place that are consistent with measures taken for all other school classes and activities. Now therefore be it resolved, Southgate Community Schools request that MDHHS and the governor allow school boards to have the option to meet either virtually, in person, or a combination of the two beginning immediately.
Thank you. Normally we make Andy read those long ones.
Right.
I'm so sorry to have not known that. Yeah, we'll get that.
All right.
All is well.
All right. Why don't we take a motion and a second first, then we can discuss this if we need to, since there aren't really any questions for staff on this one. So do we have a motion for this?
Sure. I move to approve the resolution to permit school boards to meet in person as written and direct the superintendent to send this approved resolution to Michigan's Department of Health and Human Services and the governor's office on behalf of the Southgate Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. Do we have a second?
Support.
Who is supporting that, Mr. Sage? All right. And do we have any discussion on this specific item? Seeing none, Ms. Grahowski, will you kindly call the question?
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Action item number 5. Now, this is approval of the 2021-2022 USF E-rate agreement. Ms. Irvine, who will be presenting this tonight?
I'm going to start it and then hand it over to our technology director, Ms. Nowak, to continue.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And Southgate Community Schools used R consultant Robert Rice to initiate a competitive bid process for USF E-rate switches, firewall, UPS battery replacement, and fiber maintenance. 3 bids were received for each service, and the successful bidders are explained below. And so I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Nowak to continue at this point to describe what the outcomes of these bidding exercises were and recommendation.
Welcome, Ms. Nowak.
Hi, good evening. You have the Board of Education recommendation from Mr. Rice. So we did 3 RFPs and we received, like Mr. Irvine said, we received 3 bids for the network switches. After the evaluation, with cost being the #1 factor, we've selected Delta Networks. Their total being $229,917.50 as the lowest bid. E-rate reimburses us 80% of that. So the expectation is that we would receive $183,934 back, which then the district's portion would be $45,983.50. That's for the network. We received 3 bids for the district's firewall. And again, Delta Networks came in the lowest at $13,520. Because of the software and maintenance agreement on that, we're only reimbursed 80% of the actual hardware. That's what E-rate funding covers. So we would be reimbursed $110.08. The third one is the bid for the UPS battery replacements to be awarded to Sentinel. They were the only ones that bid on that, and they had comparable prices to what we've already been purchasing as replacements. And the final one is fiber maintenance. This is an expense we typically have once a year, just for fiber maintenance is $1,000. E-rate will now cover that, as well as any additional costs should we have a fiber issue with that. So we did put an RFP out on that. These are all great savings to the bond. So all of these items were in the bond, and now that we're getting reimbursed with E-rate, we'll see that saved in the bond monies.
Appreciate that presentation. Do we have any questions for Mr. Craig? Go ahead. Questions for Ms. Nowak or Ms. Irvine?
Is this current bond or old bond?
This is current 2020 bond.
Current bond? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Wendy. Have we worked with Delta Networks or Sentinel or fiber maintenance before? Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, the fiber maintenance contract is going to turnkey, and they've done all of our service in the past. Delta Networks is new, but we spoke to Lincoln Park, had a full implementation with them, and they were also recommended by RISA.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
So even though they were the lowest bid, and that was a big factor, we also had other recommendations locally.
Oh, good. Thank
Mr.
you.
Lamas.
So I was just curious on the network side, was it all just switches or are there other components?
It's switches, servers, everything. It's a full replacement of every room, every closet in our district.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll accept the motion for this action item number 5.
Make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 USF E-rate agreements as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do you have a second?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Lamos. I did see Craig up, but I don't know who spoke or had their hand up first.
Doesn't matter.
We got Lamas on this one. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Grahowski, will you please roll call vote that?
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Nowak. All right, brings us to action item number 6. This is approval of Southgate Community Schools Limited School of Choice application. Ms. Irvine, who will be presenting that tonight?
I will go ahead and present our kindergarten enrollment. It will begin soon. Annually, Southgate Community Schools opens 50 school of choice kindergarten seats and various seats as available in grades 1 through 11. By approving this motion, the district will continue to participate in limited school of choice for 2021-22, opening 50 slots to kindergarten students for enrollment beginning March 11th and closing March 26th of 2021. And available seats for grades 1 through 11 will begin July 29th, 2021 and close August 13th, 2021. So we are moving down this path. We've actually gotten all of our enrollment, also materials all ready to go. We want to jump into the kindergarten recruitment season, and we're excited to start. And this is, again, a continuation of how we've handled school of choice in the past.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Irvine? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for this action item number 6.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Southgate Community Schools participation in limited school of choice for 2021-2022 school year in accordance with the application presented.
Thank you, Dr. Pomponio. Do we have a second to Dr. P's motion?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Sage. Any further discussion on the item?
I just have one question.
All right. Mr. Craig, you're next.
What is the rationalization behind rationale behind the dates for the grades 1 through 11? They're in March, or pardon me, in July rather than earlier. Is there a rule about that? Is that the earliest that we can do it, or would it be advantageous for us to accept school of choice enrollments before July?
Well, kindergarten enrollment, is something that families start to think about and prepare for well before, they know when their children are turning 5. This is the window of time they usually put that in place, and the enrollment starts, and we start the recruitment process. The grades 1 through 11, those are often move-ins to the area, or they are, in this case, those that have finished out their school year. They're not usually thinking about moving to another district that early. We have just a very limited amount of time. We only have 30 days total that we can use. And just typically grades 1 through 11 haven't been, we don't often get that recruitment that early. So that's what we've done in the past. I think that could change over time, but.
No, thank you. I was just curious. Thank you.
Oh, I want to add one more thing. That's really important. When we do limited school of choice, we also take a look at what we have available in space. And that is something that we know best right before the school year starts.
Yeah.
So that is actually the more critical part of that explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. Mr. Craig.
Thank you. So school of choice, right? Comes up every year. We talk about it, and I'm right where I was last year. I can't support school of choice right now. Pardon me. I realize the desire to fill those spots, but school of choice is just not something I support, and I won't be able to support this motion. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Craig. Any other questions for staff? All right, Mr. Green.
So, Dr. Irvine, through Mr. Gregg, where do you see the advantage of school of choice versus not having school of choice besides filling the seats? Is that the main goal, or where do we see the pros and cons in all this? I know this comes up every year, but I think it's important to ask every year.
Well, the pros and cons right now is that we're bringing in 803 students from out of district into our district, and we are losing 1,038 to other districts, which means that if we shut the doors to our district for school and choice, it doesn't mean that those around won't have a school of choice option. So we will still lose 1,038 students out to districts around us, but we will be unable to recoup student attrition or enrollment in the amount of 803. And just that's almost $4 million. So when we're talking about the cost issues that are part of that school of choice decision, that's a huge one, because it would be great if we could say, you know what, we're not going to allow anyone to leave. We're just not going to participate in school of choice. So our kids can't go out and no one can come in. That would be one thing, but we don't have that opportunity to shut that door to exiting, which means we would just have to eat the cost or the hit in what that does to our school system if we're not able to offer a comprehensive school system.
Mr. Green.
So through the chair to Treasurer Craig, Mr. Craig, where do you see the negative in this? Just so I'm understanding everybody's point of view.
So my opinion of this is that we lose 1,100 kids to other districts, and I think in part to the kids that we bring in from other districts. Just what I've heard from people in the community. Why are their kids going to Montessori? Why are their kids going to Cabrini? Okay, it's not that they're taking their kid and moving them to another district. They're taking them and moving them to Montessori or moving them to Cabrini or Richard. And it's not all a choice of, I want my kid to go to a private school. It's they feel like their kids are not going to school with Southgate kids. And again, I think the point of our district is to educate Southgate kids. That's why I'm not supporting this. So again, I realize that there would be a down year or two, but maybe at some point we do start recouping those kids. Maybe at some point we do start losing kids in droves to other districts or other modes of education. I don't know, but this is just my opinion of it right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Dr. Pomponio.
I'd like to say that I know that we would like to have the, Southgate students in our buildings, but, in defense of the parents and students who want a better education, I'm so happy that they choose Southgate because they see us as a better district. So without some of those students who've been with our district from kindergarten up to 11th and 12th grade, there's been some faithful students that come from Wyandotte, from Lincoln Park, and I'd hate to judge or say they are not our Southgate students because they want a better education. And for them to say that Southgate's the best choice for them, I think that's great. And I think we should not offer them that opportunity. I would hate to turn someone down just because they live in Lincoln Park or Wyandotte or wherever. And, by limiting the school of choice pool, we may downsize our district, but we're also going to downsize our offerings of like services and whatever curriculum or extra curriculum. I think that'll downsize too. So I think while everyone around us is opening their doors and have increasingly opened their doors, I think we should still continue to let those students in who think that Southgate is the best choice for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And we could spend all day on this, all evening on this. This certainly is something that we're going to have to devote to a work session or a study session when we face this again. But for now, on this specific topic, I want to go ahead and call the question.
Mr. Lamos,
No.
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
No.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
No.
What's our count?
4 yeses, 3 nos.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right, brings us to action item number 7, the approval of the metric and mode of instruction for February. Dr. or Ms. Irvine.
Yes. Okay, so this is the big topic. We've spent several conversations about the metric that we use and the mode of instruction that we use to determine what we're doing for our students. And we had a special meeting a couple weeks ago in which we talked a lot about what the appropriate risk level for daily new case averages. And I will say that originally we were planning to come with a recommendation that we consider all daily new case averages between 1 and 10 as acceptable range, and have all of our students back based on that. However, we actually don't have to do that. On February 6th and February 7th, the district did meet the metric of the average daily new case rate of 5 or fewer. So for February 6th, it was 4.93. And for February 7th, it's 4.90. And if you notice on that sheet, you can see that the average for Southgate, which constitutes 80% of this metric, that's dropped even further down to 3.9 tomorrow. And we're still waiting for Detroit numbers to come in. And we'll see, I think, that we've met that mark even more significantly than for February 8th. So we've met that. And our mode of instruction recommendation at this time is to go ahead and offer in-person, remote, and virtual to all Southgate community school students. And in doing so, we would start our high school offering for freshmen on the 19th of February. And we would start all other programming then on February 22nd, if that was the case. So at this point, we understand that were we to change or recommend any change to the metric, we would have exactly the same results if we simply followed through with the decision that we had in January. So to eliminate any more confusion around this, we just simply ask that the Board of Education approve the 3 modes of instruction: in-person, virtual, and remote for all of our students at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Irvine?
I have a question about the start dates for freshmen and the rest of the high schools. Is there a difference? Are you trying to stagger them, or what's the difference between the dates and for all other students?
I'll transfer that to our principal, Mr. Lyons.
Thanks. It's good to see everyone tonight. Our thought is that our freshmen have not been in the building at all this year, and we want to give them an opportunity to come into the building by themselves, where we can give them the attention they need. We may also invite in some of our link crew members who can help with passing times, lunches, and so on. Also gives us an opportunity to do a little bit of a soft start, where as the K through 8 started on half days, if we start with the freshmen, gives us a sense of how things are going with that group of students, and then bring everyone else in on the 22nd. Mainly it's for the benefit of the freshmen.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. That's perfect. I mean, that sounds like a good idea. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
So I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So our last agreement was to go away from the positivity rate, which would have been 5%, which incidentally has been met the last couple days anyway, and go to the average daily case, weighted with Southgate, our surrounding communities, and Detroit and River Rouge, the next two outside of our surrounding communities that we have the most school of choice, which encompasses well over 97, 98%. And it was going to be an average daily case of 5. We don't have to change anything. It was under 5 Saturday morning. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
Okay.
Sunday.
I just want, and Sunday. So 2 days in a row. So,
Yeah.
so we got that metric. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
And
Thank
just
you.
as a reminder, it is a 14-day average. Every one of those numbers is a
Right.
14-day average. So we don't have to meet it for any number of days in a row. Once it's hit, it's hit. It's the 14-day average.
And then, so the viewing public knows, and I just want to make this clear, and Ms. Irvine, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not on this one, is we know that the governor spoke today. The governor's speaking later this week. The CDC is expected to come out with other guidelines, which thank God, numbers are going down in this area. We assume are going to be a little different. But I think the viewing public just needs to know, and I'm going to refer quite simply to one of the citizen comments, with all due respect, about the moving the date and everything else, and just make a decision. We can't just make a decision to the general public. We are required by state law every 30 days to review what we do. And if those numbers change or the governor's laws change, then we have to change. So I know you think we're just picking numbers and just make a decision, but it's really not quite that simple. Every 30 days, we have to review this and verify it or move on depending on what we see. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other discussion? All right. Seeing none, we could, who would like to make a motion tonight? And that one, let me read the motion too from the motion that's recommended. So it says, so if someone could make this motion, I move to approve I move to approve in-person, remote, and virtual instruction to all Southgate Community Schools students in accordance with the established metric. Somebody would be willing to make that motion tonight?
Rick.
Sure.
Mr. Lund.
I move to approve in-person, remote, and virtual instruction to all Southgate Community School students in accordance with the established metric.
Thank you, Mr. Lamas. Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Green.
Support.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Grahowski, will you please call the question?
Dr. Pomponio,
Yes.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer, Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Motion carries. Welcome back to our high school students, Mr. Lyons. Thank you for all your work and good luck to you, sir. All right. Do we have any employee representatives scheduled to speak tonight or wish to speak?
I know I haven't gotten any message.
Okay.
To that effect.
And then moving on to item L, information announcements. Any board members wish to make any announcements tonight or have any information to pass along?
Mr. Estheimer, or Mr. President?
Yes, Ms. Dr. Paponio.
I just wanted to thank all of the workers and staff and administrators and teachers in our district, because through all of this and bringing the kids back, their positions and what they do on an everyday basis is thankless. So I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for everything that you do on a regular basis.
Thank you. I echo that.
And
Any,
I
Mr. Lamas?
Go ahead, Jason.
Mr. Lamas, you're up.
I'll say I agree 100%. Thanks to the Colt team and everyone that had anything at all to do with helping us make this decision. Hopefully we've made the right one, but it's been a grueling one. And, but I'm very comfortable with the decision we've made tonight because of everyone's hard work and thinking behind organizing and operationalizing what we're going to be doing. So thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other discussion? All right. Moving away from our information and announcements, that brings up M, which is our adjournment.
Mr. Estheimer, President Estheimer, sir, Your Highness,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion?
Support.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Ms. Grosky, roll call us out.
Mr. Sage,
Yes.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Lamos,
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio.
Yes.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.